All right. Well, welcome to week 2 of Bio 1140. And we're on chapter 2 already. So this is my weekly live address. I'm coming at you from my childhood home. This is actually the bedroom I grew up in. It's pretty wild. And yes, I'm sporting a new mustache for as long as my wife will let me have it. So just to get everybody kind of caught up on where we are. Just as a reminder, this is a 16-week-long class. We've got 12 different chapters out of a book that I wrote that we're doing. So that's 12. And then we've got 4 weeks for tests. So that's, 12 plus 4 is 16. So think about this class as, 4-week blocks where we do 3 chapters and then we do a test. And that's 4 weeks. Okay. So we're in our first block. And we just completed chapter 1 last week. And then this week we're on chapter 2. And of course, as you guys know, I'm not really enforcing any type of due dates. You can turn in everything on like the last week of class, the 15th week if you need to. But to keep up with the class, by now you should have at least, that first week I had a syllabus quiz. I've got an opening survey and quiz 1. And then now this week, we will be on chapter 2, and you'll need to get quiz 2 done, and then, and then you'll be caught up. And then by the 4th week, when we take our first test, you'll want to have those 3 quizzes done, quiz for chapter 1, chapter 2, chapter 3, and you'll need at least 1 science and digital literacy assignment completed. And that way you'll be on track. And not only will you be on track, you'll also you'll get 5 bonus points for that, just for getting that stuff done on time. And then you can do that for each of those 4 chapter blocks or 4-week blocks. You can get 20 bonus points. And if you do all of them, you get another 5, so 25 bonus points. So if you have any questions, you can do it in the live chat. But let me just give you an overview of where we're at this week. So a lot of biology books, their first week is, this introduction to science, and they talk a little bit about the scientific method, and then they talk about, evolution a little bit and a couple themes in science. Well, I realized that those needed to be fleshed out way more than what was in our books. Even in our majors book, it was very wanting. So I took those introductory chapters and split them into chapters 1 and chapter 2. So chapter 2 are these themes in science. So this is a biology course. So one of the things that we talk about is, what does it mean to be living? The question that people often ask, what is life? That's one way of looking at it. So in this chapter, I make this way of thinking about it. Instead of going, what is life? Think about, what does life do? And that's subtly different, right, than asking, what is life? Life is not a thing like my Diet Pepsi here. This is I'm going to have some Diet Pepsi while I'm hanging out tonight. I drink Diet Pepsi every day so I don't get sick. Must be medicinal. No, just kidding. That's called anecdotal data. Remember that from the last chapter. It's not working here. Okay. So in this chapter, think about, what does life do? And the idea here is, life is not a thing like my Diet Pepsi. Life is an action. Life does something. Life is a verb, like I drink my Diet Pepsi. I'm doing an action. Life is also an action. So the question is, what does life do? What are these things that life must do to be considered living? And in that first part of the chapter, to me, one of the most important things that life does, life creates order. Order. Think about this. You are a highly ordered system. You have millions upon millions of chemical reactions taking place every minute or every second of your life inside of one of your 17 trillion cells. I know, that's pretty profound, isn't it? Think about that. You have so many chemical reactions. So life is taking these building blocks, and it's like taking a Legos, and I don't have any of my old Lego ships around here. My dad kind of took over my room and made it an office. Not that he really works in here anymore. But you build up a Lego ship, you create order. Life creates order. And to do that, like to clean your room or to make a Lego Millennium Falcon, I'm waiting for my daughter to ask for that one. But when we get that Lego Millennium Falcon, you take all these parts and you take this random bunch of stuff and you put it together, and lo and behold, you have the Millennium Falcon, and your daddy is really, really, really happy. Hopefully the kid is too, right? And then to do that, you also need energy. So what does life do? Life takes energy from the environment and creates order. And that's why we can say that life is an island of low entropy, because if entropy is a measure of disorder, the higher the entropy you have, the more disordered a system it is. Much like if I let my room not get cleaned, it has high entropy. But life does the exact opposite. Life extracts energy from the environment and creates order. And it does this, creating order through metabolic reactions, which is the sum of all of our chemical reactions. We break things down, and then we extract the energy from them, and then we build them back up into the cells of our body. And that's what really life does. Now, a lot of definitions of life include reproduction. I didn't reproduce until I was in my 40s. Was I alive before I had a kid? The answer is clearly yes, right? Well, somebody could say, well, you had the ability to reproduce. Well, the idea here is that for there to be a continuity of life, life has to be able to reproduce. So all those metabolic reactions, they are directed by our DNA, which is heritable information. And our DNA can direct all the metabolic activities of our cells. It can also direct us to grow from a single-celled organism into an adult. And then we can copy that information, and we can make a new offspring with that. And, life got started one time on this planet, once, about 3.8 to 4 billion years ago. And you represent the unbroken lineage of life since it got started 3.8 billion years ago. I know, it's kind of a profound thing to think about on a random Monday night, right? But that's just it. Reproduction happens and ensure the continuity of life. Like I said, we're all this unbroken lineage of unbroken line of life since the first life on this planet. And, whenever you copy information for reproduction, you don't always copy it correctly. It's mutations. And that mutations is what allows for life to evolve over time. So as a consequence of reproduction that ensures the continuity of life, life also evolves over time. And that's what life does, right? Life is taking energy from the environment and then using metabolic reactions to create order by using energy from the environment. And as a consequence of that, to ensure the continuity of life, life must reproduce, and also because it reproduces, it can evolve. This is kind of cool stuff. So the other thing that's in this chapter as well is we talk about what does life do, which is important, and I'll come back to that in chapter 5 when we start talking about looking for life's origins in other places, like other planets, which is just ridiculously cool if you ask me. And then, okay, so the other thing, what does life do? The second part is emergent properties. There's a hierarchy to our universe, right? I mean, at the tiniest scales, you, me, this can here, your computer screen, and everything else in the universe is made of 3 subatomic particles: protons, neutrons, and electrons, right? I mean, okay, so all of you into quantum physics, yes, I know baryonic particles are protons and neutrons are made up of quarks, up, up, down, 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 up, and that electrons are leptons. But for those of you that don't know that stuff, for our purposes, protons, neutrons, and electrons, right? Those are the particles that make up that make up atoms and make up all the matter in the universe. Those 3 particles. Hey, something just went across there. Oh, that's a speck of dust, wasn't it? Not a poltergeist. So then we had these 92 naturally occurring elements. And those 92 naturally occurring elements, there's think of carbon, nitrogen, oxygen, lead, gold, magnesium, calcium, potassium, sodium, chlorine. These are elements, and those elements are made up of just 3 subatomic particles, right? So carbon and nitrogen, oxygen, all made up of protons, neutrons, and electrons. You put them together in different ratios, and you get different elements that have different properties. So an emergent property is a novel property of a more complex system, and that property is different than the building blocks. So a carbon atom is different from protons, neutrons, and electrons. Here's a good one. Sodium and chlorine. Sodium is a metal. You put sodium in water and the damn thing catches on fire, right? Chlorine is a gas. It'll kill you. You put sodium and chlorine together, what do you get? Sodium chloride. Table salt, right? A food additive. Something we have to have. So table salt is an emergent property of a metal and a poisonous gas. Isn't that wild? Water. Water is made up of oxygen and hydrogen. Those are both gases. Put them together, you get a liquid. That is an emergent property. Water. Liquid water is a different property than the building blocks. So we go from subatomic particles to atoms to molecules. Molecules come together to form cells. Cells matter, right? Cells are really, really important because cells are where life emerges. Cells are the smallest unit of life. That's cell theory. All living things are made of cells, and cells are the most basic unit of life. And in today's world, all life comes from cells. Well, except for the very first life that evolved through metabolically active rocks. I know, isn't that weird? Metabolically active rocks. That's how we think life got started. We'll have some more Diet Pepsi here. So this is life's hierarchy, right? We get novel properties. So life, a living thing, is an emergent property of a whole bunch of molecules working together. So, right, you are greater than the sum of your parts. So cells come together to form tissues, which forms organs, which forms organ systems, which forms an entire animal. You are made up of 17 trillion or more cells. 17 or more trillion, right? And you are an emergent property. You and your sibling and your parents are made up of the same basic building blocks as everything else in this world. And as a human, we're 99.99% the same DNA. And in fact, the only difference is different versions of our genes. Yet no two people are the same because of these complexities of emergent properties. And then the hierarchy keeps going up to populations, and then populations form communities, which form ecosystems, which forms biospheres, and we won't go much from there. Okay, now, the other theme in this chapter is about the role of science and how scientific understanding has changed the way that we see ourselves in the universe. And in fact, I'm working on that video right now. I had an old one. It's a little bit boring. I'm trying to make it a little bit better for you guys. But here's the thing. Science has revolutionized the way we see ourselves in the universe. And it has also fundamentally changed the way we think about how the universe works. And so in this video, I ask some questions like, what do you think are the most important scientific discoveries of all time? I can think of a few. One is the Earth is round, right? Thanks Copernicus and Galileo. Newton's laws of motion and gravity. Einstein's general theory of relativity and special theory of relativity. Quantum mechanics. Those, without those theories, we would not be able to work, and we wouldn't have the world we have today. All of our electronics that you and I use on a day-to-day basis are built on understanding quantum physics, which is just weird. And then there's also this little theory of evolution by natural selection. Unfortunately, biology is we're the only field of science that our main paradigm is, people question it or don't believe in our major paradigm. And that, of course, is evolution by natural selection. And last week, you learned that that evolution is a fact, that species change over time. I can observe it, I can measure it. And that evolution by natural selection is a theory that explains why species change over time, right? So in this chapter, one of the things that I talk about is how the theory of evolution by natural selection changed the way that we do science, right? It not only was the first theory to explain the origin of species, not the origin of life. That's a lot of people think that Darwin explained the origin of life. Hey, we're still working on that one. But he explained the origin of all the species that we see today by saying that species descended from common ancestry by slow accumulation of change over time. And this theory was really important because it did several things. One, evolution by natural selection says, we all descended from common ancestors. I know it's really weird, isn't it? You mean the bacteria growing on your teeth share a common ancestor. You might have to go back 2 billion years, but our DNA, we use the same 4 nucleotides, adenine, thymine, guanine, cytosine. We have the same genetic code. We use the same proteins. We even have some of the same metabolic processes. If I was drinking a real Pepsi, my body would break down glucose the same way a bacteria does, using the exact same enzymes, because we share a common ancestry. And that shared common ancestry explains the unity of life. So think about your dog, a cat, a whale, a bat, a bird, a lizard, a frog. We all have 4 limbs. We've got 1 bone, 2 bone, lots of bones. And the reason why is because we all descended from an ancestor that had 1 bone, 2 bone, lots of bones. That's the unity of life, but it also explained the diversity of life and the fact that we have millions. There are millions of species on this planet. And that's because life is diversifying constantly into new things as they evolve, but they maintain their past, right? You're working with this. This is a modified fish fins. I know, isn't that crazy? Modified fish fins. I'm not kidding. There's a great book called Your Inner Fish by Neil Shubin, Your Inner Fish. And if you have enough to read, there's also a PBS special called Your Inner Fish. So at any rate, getting back to evolution, what it did is it explained the unity and diversity of life by saying we descended from common ancestry, which explains why there's so many similarities in life, but the life is evolving over time by this process called natural selection, and that's why you have so much diversity. And then the other major thing that evolution did, when Darwin came up with that theory, nobody really understood the origin of species. In fact, people thought that everything was created in the past in some perfect form, and any deviation from that perfect form was a deviation from perfection. So there was no evolution, because that would be bad. And you're probably going, I wonder where that idea came from. And if you're going back to Greece, to this guy named Aristotle, you'd be correct. Aristotle's been influencing Western thought for a long time, and not always in a good way. But Aristotle thought that life was unchanging. There was these perfect forms, and that any deviation from that perfect form was a deviation from perfection, so you wouldn't evolve. He also believed in the great chain of being between lower and higher life forms. And we're still trying to get from underneath those thoughts that are over 2,000 years old. That's pretty crazy. But by proposing a natural mechanism, a natural explanation, species change over time by natural selection, there was no need to invoke a supernatural or divine explanation to explain why we have so many species today. And, that was like the last nail in the coffin for, supernatural explanations and vitalism and stuff like that. Vitalism is this vital force that that was what made life different from a rock. Now we just know that, we don't have a vital force. We're just an emergent property of a complex system. Okay, man. All right. And then the last thing is, why do we care about evolution? Why do we care about this descent with common ancestry? And why do we care about these things? One is, it's good to know how science has influenced the way we think about the world and the way we see the world and what it does for our worldview. Secondly, hey, we descend from common ancestor. That is incredibly important. Let me ask you this. Have you ever wondered why we study mice in science to understand how a disease might work, aging might work, a new drug might work, or why we study fruit flies to understand genetics, or why we study small worms to understand genetics and development? No, seriously. Much of how we know we grow from a single cell zygote into an adult comes from fruit flies and microscopic worms. And we even study yeast to understand ourselves. Why do we do that? The reason why we can study a fruit fly to understand how a fruit fly goes from a single-celled zygote, which is a fertilized cell, into an adult is because the way they have growth and development is the same way we do. We have genes that lay out our body plan and become activated at certain times that work the same way in a fruit fly or a worm as they do in a human. And because we have that shared common ancestry, we operate really similarly. And we can study mice and worms and fruit flies and yeast cells to understand about ourselves. And in fact, most of what we know about genetics comes from fruit flies. That's so weird, but it's true because we shared common ancestry. Now, it might have been 550 million years ago since we last shared a common ancestor with fruit flies, but that pathways have been conserved for that long. And I just find that amazing. And that's why that's so important. The other implication, and we're going to get to this in chapter 11. I'm slowly getting all these chapters up, by the way. But the last one is like on GMOs. So many people scared of GMOs. Don't be scared of GMOs. If I have a gene inside of me to make insulin to help lower my blood sugar levels and get that sugars into my cells, like my fat cells and muscle cells, that's a protein. I can take the gene to make insulin in me, cut it out, put it in a bacteria, turn it on in the bacteria, and guess what the bacteria is going to make? Insulin, because the genetic code is the same. So we can make GMOs by moving around DNA, and we know what's going to happen. There's not this like great unknown tinkering with nature blind thing. No. We have an idea what's going to happen. And in fact, that was one of the first GMOs we ever made, was genetically modified bacteria. They were technically transgenic organisms because they had human DNA in them to make human insulin, and that has saved millions of lives of diabetics. So that's another reason why understanding, common ancestry and these shared characteristics across all life, that we not only use it for scientific study to understand ourselves, but we can also modify organisms to help benefit us and the environment as well. Okay, well, that's my introduction for this week. I haven't seen any questions pop up. If anybody's got a question, shoot. If not, I'm going to sign off, and I'll come back again next week. And I'm also going to have another video. I'm working on another video for this week to get it posted. Like I said, some of the videos I've had up there for about 4 years, and I like to stay fresh, and a lot has happened in our lives in the last 4 years, and especially the last 2. So I'm trying to update them to be a little bit more current. Will I be uploading a glossary for the textbook? No, I don't actually. And in fact, I intentionally don't upload a glossary for the textbook. My thing with vocabulary words is, when that is a fantastic question. Here's the way I see it with vocabulary words. When you're reading a book, I have words that I think everybody should know: allele, natural selection, a gene, things like that. But some of you may know what those words are. Some of you may not. My thing is when you're reading a required reading, or you're reading anything, if you come across a word that you don't know, I use this. And I have an app on here. It's called the Wikipedia. And I go to the Wikipedia app and I usually say, hey, Google, what does allele mean? In fact, I just popped my phone to turn on to answer this for me, because I said, hi, Google. Oh, what is an allele? Oh, it's looking for YouTube. So it's going to go straight to YouTube because, of course, Google owns YouTube. Let me shut this down here. But I would say you can just whip out your phone, pull out your phone, and look words up, because I don't know what you know, and I don't know what you know and don't know. So my thing is it's having the meta. It's called metacognition. It's this self-awareness of what you know and what you don't know, and then importantly, recognize it when you say, I don't know what that word means, and then go look it up. And I'm intentionally kind of putting the ball in your court to go look up words that you think are important for a chapter, rather than me pointing them out. I think if I point out all the vocabulary words, and then just give a definition. It's just too easy to copy it down. Whereas if you actually go and look this up yourself, then not only are you recognizing what you don't know, you're engaged in your own active learning. And man, that is how we learn, is by actively learning and engaging ourselves, and then realizing what we don't know. So that's a fantastic question. I'm glad you asked that. 10 years ago, or 20 years ago, before Wikipedia, I would have definitely done a glossary, but there's no need for me to repeat the Wikipedia. Use it. It's a fantastic resource. It's like amazing. Okay, anybody else have another question? All right. Well, I tell you what, thanks for showing up tonight. I think I'm going to do a Zoom meeting, because I'd like to see some faces, right? I mean, man, I miss being in class with you guys right now, and I'm looking forward to getting back to some type of in-class test, or not in-class test. Won't ever do in-class test again, just to let you know. But get back in class and get to know you guys. All right. Well, y'all have a good week, and if you have any questions, I'm here for you. And then we also have the online learning assistant, Liz Fain, too, and she's out there. There's CAPS. There's Khan Academy and Crash Course. Use these resources. The Wikipedia as well. Not kidding. And in fact, I always laugh. I say, if you quote the Wikipedia and to correct me, even if the Wikipedia is wrong, I'll still give you credit, and then I will go back in there and fix the Wikipedia. So I'm that supportive of it. And my thing to you is, anytime a teacher says it's not accurate, where's the data? Show me data, because they've actually done this experiment. It's as accurate as any textbook. Second, if anybody can change it, well, if it's wrong, why haven't you changed it? Throw it back on anybody that says it's inaccurate. Define the inaccuracies, and if it's inaccurate, ask your teachers why they haven't changed it. Just saying. So teacher, the Wikipedia is power. It's knowledge, and it's free. I'm getting off on the Wikipedia. I'll have another YouTube video on that, and I'll let you guys go. All right, y'all have a good night. And like I said, I'm here if you have any questions.